Hello and welcome to a special episode of Generation 16. As a follow-up to the previous video where I ranked all 42 games found on the Genesis Mini, we're going to take a quick look at the Japanese Mega Drive Mini. Of course, the Japanese and US units are almost identical, aside from the images printed on the plastic. The Mega Drive unit features the logo on the bottom right, the big, beautiful gold 16-bit text below the cartridge port, and even details like the cartridge lock text under the power button. Oh, and the reset button is blue on the Mega Drive. And of course, you have the working cartridge slot flaps, removable expansion port door, and sliding volume control. Unlike the Genesis Mini, which included two classic 3-button controllers in the package, the Japanese Mega Drive Mini shipped with the far superior 6-button controller. This is almost identical to the Japanese 6-button Mega Drive controller from the 90s, complete with a mode button on the right shoulder and the little bumps on the Y and B buttons. The controller will likely feel a bit small in the hands of those who remember the Genesis 6-button, as the North American controller was slightly longer than its Japanese counterpart. For my money, the Genesis 6-button is one of the greatest controllers ever made, especially for fighting games, so I'm all for this replica. Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition is a joy to play with this controller. The standard Japanese Mega Drive Mini shipped with a single controller, while the Mega Drive Mini W package shipped with two. The Deluxe pack, which is the one I wish I'd gotten my hands on, also features a selection of Mega Drive cartridge replicas. Those replica cartridges aren't the best part though. As of this recording, Sega of Japan is the only group to release the Mega Drive Tower Mini set, consisting of a replica Mega CD, Super 32X, as well as two cartridges, Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic & Knuckles. In the EU and North American markets, region-specific versions of the Tower Mini set were sent to journalists and influencers. Okay, let's go through this stuff because it just makes me so happy that they even exist. First of all, the cartridges. Sonic the Hedgehog seems pretty much perfect, right down to the cartridge lock notch on the side. Sonic & Knuckles goes even further with a working flap so that people can take advantage of the patented lock-on technology. If you look closely, you can even see that the cartridge includes the various warnings engraved on full-sized games. This stack of classic games can either sit in the Mega Drive Mini's cartridge slot, or in the included Super 32X mini console. Again, it's just a really beautiful mini rendition of the ill-fated add-on, right down to the metal plates in the cartridge protrusion. I also love how the cartridge slot on the 32X Mini is a slightly different size, just like its full-size counterpart. The cartridge flaps on the 32X Mini are true to the original console as well. My favorite bit, though, is the Mega CD. This mini version represents the original add-on almost perfectly, right down to things like the mixer cable manager slide on the left side of the console, and the guide to what the two consoles' lights represent. Even more delightful is that inside of the unit features a printout of the system circuit board and a copy of Sonic CD sitting in the disc tray. I love how Sega has really leaned into this set. Contrary to Nintendo and its almost complete scrubbing of the Virtual Boy from its history, Sega seems to be celebrating two console add-ons that many point to as the beginning of its downfall as a console manufacturer. Tucked away at the back of the Mega Drive Tower Mini box is a little envelope which contains a nice booklet that features case schematics for the Mega Drive, Mega CD, Super 32X, and the Sonic & Knuckles cartridge. On the back page is some sheet music for Sega's official company song, Young Force. What is an official company song, you ask? Apparently this was a pretty common thing with Japanese companies decades ago, akin to, say, a fight song for a sports team. Young Force was created in the early 90s, around the same time the Genesis started taking off in international markets, so it sort of makes sense that it's included in this wonderful little package.
Sega, Sega, Sega.
Also included is a small poster. On one side are the same schematics. On the other, we have what appears to be a Mega Drive release list. Nice touch. Like Nintendo before it, Sega went the route of different curated lists of games included on its mini console based on whichever region it was being sold in. I covered all 42 games in a previous video, so we're just going to concentrate on the differences. 17 of those games do not appear on the Japanese Mega Drive Mini. Games on the US version and not the Japanese version include Alex Kidd and the Enchanted Castle, Altered Beast, Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, Earthworm Jim, Echo the Dolphin, Eternal Champions, Kid Chameleon, Light Crusader, Shinobi 3, Sonic Spinball, Sonic the Hedgehog, Strider, Toe Jam and Earl, Vector Man, Virtua Fighter 2, and Wonder Boy in Monster World. I'm going to split up the games that are on the Japanese Mega Drive and not the US Genesis Mini into two categories. The first group are the games that would need massive localization in order to be included in an English language console. Dyna Brothers 2 is a strategy game where you raise dinosaurs. It's a real shame this couldn't have been translated, as the premise sounds great and the presentation here is really attractive. I think this is kind of a god game, but I can't really be sure. By all accounts, Languorous II is a great strategy game for the Mega Drive, but not one I've personally experienced. There's a good fan translation out there for this, but no official translation as far as I know. It's a shame this one stayed off the Genesis Mini, but totally understandable. Like Technosoft's Herzog 2, Falcom's Lord Monarch is another very early example of a real-time strategy game from a Japanese developer. In Lord Monarch, you use your subjects and armies to take over territory in dozens of different maps. This is a port of a Japanese PC game which previously appeared on the Super Famicom. Loads of translation work would be required to bring this one to the Genesis Mini. The Mega Drive Mini is just stinking with RPGs. Mado Monogatari from Compile is the final official game released for the Mega Drive in Japan. It's a 3D dungeon crawler, the last in a series of RPGs from Compile, and of course features a ton of Japanese text to translate. This would be so great to get in English though, it's just a really cute looking game. While the inclusion of a quiz game on the Genesis Mini would have been another great multiplayer opportunity, Party Quiz Mega Q is almost entirely text-driven, and I'm guessing a lot of, if not all of the trivia is aimed at a Japanese audience from the early 90s. So even if the game were translated, it might not be the best experience. I do love that the Mega Q includes ads for old Genesis hardware though. It's a shame that an official translation of Renta Hero has never happened. I've always been fascinated with this action RPG by AM2, featuring a hero for hire and a one-on-one fighter-style battle system. Of course, this couldn't have come to the Genesis Mini, but it sure would be nice to see Sega get this to an English audience eventually. Yet another strategy game. The Hybrid Front is a war simulation similar to the Dyson Yaku series or Advance Wars, where you control multiple units across a battlefield, figuring out which works best against each enemy unit and, I'm assuming, managing your resources carefully. So much Japanese text in this one. Yu Hakusho is another one of those games you always kept hearing about back in the day. It's a really solid fighting game from Treasure, and normally even a bit of untranslated text wouldn't make it unplayable for someone who doesn't read Japanese. But I don't know that bringing this to the Genesis Mini would have been worth it. It's definitely a better game than Virtua Fighter 2 or Eternal Champions, but the license carries almost no recognition for your average casual or lapsed Genesis player in North America. And now for games that could have made the jump to the Genesis Mini. The first one is Assault Suit Lennis, which is just the Japanese version of Target Earth, a much revered but quite difficult and unique shooter featuring a mech that can fight on the ground and in space. And just like on the Genesis Mini, if you switch the Mega Drive Mini to English, the English version of this game plays. Game no Kanzume Otokuyu is a collection of 12 downloadable games from the Mega Modem's Game Toshokan service, two of which will be familiar to US gamers, Flicky and Fatal Labyrinth. Also included are 16T, Putter Golf, Hyper Marbles, Metal City, Paddle Fighter, Doki Doki Penguin Land, Pyramid Magic, Robot Battler, Teddy Boy Blues, and Awarg Hero in the Sky. While most of these games are quite small, they effectively increased the title count on the Mega Drive Mini to 53, and they would definitely have been an interesting addition to the Genesis Mini. When we're talking about the difference between the Genesis and Mega Drive Mini libraries, Musha is the biggest letdown in my opinion. This most coveted of Genesis shooters would have been a perfect addition to the US library instead of, say, a dog like Virtua Fighter 2. Importing a Mega Drive Mini is still a far sight cheaper than buying a complete in-box copy of the original cartridge. Powerball is a fantasy sports game from Namco that can be best described as soccer meets rugby or American football. Considering this was released in North America, it could have easily been included on the Genesis Mini, and when you think about how much of the Genesis success was built on sports games, Powerball would have filled a massive gap in the Genesis Mini's current lineup, though it's not nearly as good as, say, Mutant League Football. I ranked Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine pretty low in my Genesis Mini video, and I get why that's the version of Puyo Puyo that we got, since it was redressed to take advantage of Sonic's popularity here, but it would have been so great to get Puyo Puyo 2 instead. Even without a translation, this sequel to Compile's puzzle game is so much better than the original in every way. I'm going to put Puzzle in Action Tant-R on the could-have-been side, if only because there is a translation of this game out there. It was included on the Sega Classics collection for the PlayStation 2 back in 2005. This microgame collection feels almost like a predecessor to something like the WarioWare games, with short challenges that require the user to figure out what's happening quickly and leave very little room for error. It would have been cool to get Slapfight MD on the Genesis Mini, since most players on this side of the world have never seen it. It's a toe-plant shooter that features a Gradius-style power-up system, where you choose your weapons based on a menu running down the side of the screen. However, if I was forced to choose between getting this or Musha, I'd choose Musha. Snow Brothers is another toe-plan game on the Mega Drive Mini, and another toe-plan game that could easily have been included on the Genesis Mini. This feels like an answer to Bubble Bobble, where the two protagonists clear screen after screen of bad guys, only instead of bubbles, they're using snowballs. I said in my Genesis Mini video that Shinobi 3 is a better game than Revenge of Shinobi. I stand by that, though the Revenge of Shinobi is still an all-time classic. I wonder why the US got the sequel while the Japanese Mini features Revenge. No reason this couldn't have been on both units, though I suppose Sega didn't want Shinobi Overload. There is a third version of the Genesis, or Mega Drive Mini. The Asian version features mostly a mix of the games found in the North American and Japanese units, though it does contain 4 games exclusive to that particular region. Alien Soldier is the infamously difficult boss rush game from Treasure that features extremely impressive sprite work. It would have been nice to get this on the Genesis Mini, since it can be played in English. You know, across all 3 versions of Sega's mini consoles, you actually have a nearly complete treasure collection. We're only missing McDonald's Treasureland Adventure. I know some people love Outrun 2019, but I've never been a big fan. This futuristic take on Yu Suzuki's classic driving game is pretty alright, but it doesn't hold a candle to the original. I don't think the Genesis Mini suffers at all for this game not being part of its library. I really wish we'd gotten Shining Force 2 on the Genesis Mini. I love the original Shining Force, but the sequel is just more of everything that's great about the first game. I don't know how I'd feel about possibly losing the original in favor of the sequel, but hey, why not both? Sword of Vermilion has not aged well, but it wouldn't hurt to have another Genesis RPG on the North American mini console. This game features 3D traversal and real-time fighting both during random battles and boss encounters. I hope you've enjoyed this special episode of Generation 16 and this closer look at the Japanese Mega Drive Mini. We'll return to our regularly scheduled episodes after this. Please like, share, and subscribe, and consider supporting the show on Patreon. See you next time.